All right. You're not listening. I goes outside last night looking at this Perseid meteor shower, the disappointment that's become, although I saw some interesting things. And you crickets were the loudest I've ever heard. It's like a challenge. It's like this threat you put on me. That's really got to stop, folks. It's not really that hard. And although, I just said that I'm going to go down through some stuff. Probably I'm going to do something today I don't really like doing because it's like putting a gun in your hands. And I'm going to do it also on my side. It's not good because it's just an ad hoc approach to looking at some problems I'm noticing with people. I said the crickets are our failure to respond more correctly. I could say more correctly. And I think we've got a really, really correctly way once you start seeing how this starts to lay out, that we're not doing as a people. None of us are. We get ourselves into trouble, or we allow ourselves into trouble, or we step ourselves into trouble without really thinking what we're up against. Listen behind the woodshed. You don't take your lessons very well behind the woodshed, that you just jump in. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that you're asking questions about, what do you think about this? And that's what I ask you to do. What do you think about how this all plays out? How is this all playing out? What are we into? Well, it takes a little bit of a study. I'm here to accelerate that lesson. I'm accelerating your path, your journey down your path. If America, that we understand that the thing, that the notion and our ideas that was the best place in all of history and of people to live, and a restricted government that actually sat there to protect you, and the law's there to do it. We've been usurped, but in many ways. I keep suggesting in lots of ways you can see. In a way, that's all irrelevant because it doesn't matter what name you put on it or what you think you've identified. The point is that you are oppressed. You're hunkering down, or you think you're not, or you say you're not hunkering down. I think everyone's hunkering down to some level. I'm doing what I can not to hunker down, but even I can only chew on so much myself. So I understand there's limitations, not a judgment, but there's a reckoning we have to come with in our head, in our mind. And those Perseids, I was thinking about those things. I did see some interesting things. It was supposed to come 200 or so an hour or so. I was lucky to see 2, but the 2 I saw was kind of fun. One was identical. It was an identical, almost in absolute same placement. It was a little different color than one I had seen a week ago. And I realized now, a week ago, I saw a Perseid meteor before the main event. Pretty fascinating. And then I noticed something that I hadn't really seen ever before. Looking up in the sky. And I understand about twinkling stars, and I understand about their flaring up and all that in the atmosphere. I try to calculate all that as to what I'm looking at, try to keep it true. Be real. All of a sudden, this thing that wasn't there before flares up. It reminded me, if anybody of you have ever seen I've been studying manganese, so it's in my tongue. Magnesium wool flash bulb, how those fire off. If you've ever seen one of those fire off, this was like a slow motion one of those. It even had a trailing heat die off, just like that. It reminded me of a magnesium bulb. And when I looked, I started to realize what I was looking at, and I said, this is a meteor shower, and that meteor is a point of light. It's not a streak. I stepped aside myself. I stepped about 10 feet over, just in case that thing didn't come down and hit me. You can have fun like that, too. Just go out and look around, even as disappointing as it was. So I found some pretty interesting things, neat little responses. Nature is being heaped up and hopped up by NASA. And somehow I don't remember this. When I was younger, all these things in this nature was really, really an amazing thing. They didn't have to hop it up. It was, you just look around, and every time you looked around, you realized how puny you were. And then we got bigger, and we got more aware. And some of that all kind of fell away, which is a little bit of a disappointment. Like I said, the little guy in me is disappointed. It doesn't mean that little guy's not waiting for the better way. I may not see that. That little guy may not see that, but we're going to fight for it. I think we're going to fight for it. And fighting is an interesting term. I think Stephen was talking about the fight. It's really, you're in a different fight. I keep telling you that. He kind of agrees with the violence thing, or not the violence thing. It's a force. utilizing the gun. He's in the same. We got to change that way, folks. We don't need to do it. I'm seeing we don't need to do it. I'm experienced in the fact that we don't need to do it. It's a little slower going it the other way. It's certainly not definite, but it's not as two-sided a sword that you're wielding either. You're not going to get cut by it if you do it correctly. And this is what I'm going to try and touch on today. But the way we think about stuff may be outside of our control. I've been talking about epigenetic manipulation now coming into the news, and notice to us that it's going on. Real-time DNA transfer, real-time effects on you. Not just the long-term detriment upon your health and immune systems, but real-time changing that the body goes through in the marvelous, we can call this machine, this creation of the body, just a miracle on its own, how it adapts and what it'll try and adapt to, and how talk about resilience. It's the real resilience, not the faux resilience that they want to tell you that the government can provide for you. And this is the thing you start to realize. There's this other reality they want you to buy into. And a lot of times they get that signature from you, and that's pretty much it. Although I've told you, be careful not to get too wrapped up in a lot of these documents. If you don't have to resort to them, then why worry about them? And this is what I want to kind of touch here in a summary, very summary way. And I shake to say that when I say it that way, because I know it's probably not a good deal. And as I just thought about it, this is for the past cast. This is BTWRLM 175, BTWRLM 175. Now I don't have to put that in cut it into the audio, as you may have heard before. I've been trying to figure out when I forget how to cut it in the beginning. So you've seen a little glitch, and those of you, I hope you laugh at that poor editing. But anyway, there it was. You can get the information up front for all y'all in past cast and into the future. And future generations, if we ever get this put onto places where that they won't get it erased. But your mind will be affected. And I've been telling you a long time ago, when we heard about the Flint thing, I said, don't be surprised if you find the water problems everywhere. The government's been lying to us. I talk about Fukushima, was the pulling of the monitors, was that you didn't figure out you were being poisoned by radiation because they couldn't blame it on Fukushima. I've been through all that. It's the same thing with this water. They don't tell you their municipal drinking water systems are all put under so-called regulation. Remember that regulation is really the license to pollute a certain amount. That's like the Clean Water Act. You got to understand how this really works down. And I told you, don't be surprised if you find more water coming out. The more places are going to be toxic. Well, sure enough, in the first, I'll get right to the tabs here. Unsafe levels of toxic chemicals found in drinking water for 6 million Americans. Okay, so they always limit. You notice that the statement's always limiting, but you see another story, another 6 million. And they talk about a particular type of substance, perfluoroalkyl. So it's an alkaline fluoride product, right? So we understand that's working on your brain, right? I mean, this is what they understand. And so you're in a position where you got to fight even the imposition of your diminishment by an external force. This is it's an operation against you, and you have a lot of work to do here. This is a lot of work. The preparation's a lot of work because you have to undo a ton of stuff in order to start to see clearly. And not to judge, but to just point out, you'll stop talking nonsense in the chats. I can just tell you, it's just, you realize there's certain subject matters that are really irrelevant to all this. You either lay it down and lay down your foundation and run to fix the wrong you see right, fix the wrong that you see needs to be made right, or you're just a talker, you're a pretender. You can talk, chat and type, and nothing ever will come of that. In fact, we had a little discussion about what we are doing. I said, we? Don't put me in that we. And there was a big support for the we. Yeah, I've told you we have to work in unison, but that's not a we. And then I said, we as a corporation. Don't worry, don't forget about that. Non-dependent people have to be working in their own way, but all at one time. That's the force to be reckoned with we the people. And so there's a semantic, if you will, if you want to say it that way as an excuse, but there's real, when you have to listen to what I'm saying, and it does take over time. I don't quite do it maybe quite so right to convey these really important concepts. And this is where I'm seeing the failure in lots and lots of people talking. They have really, I have to bounce it off of what I've studied in earnest to find where the heck did America go? In earnest. Not making it up, and denying that wounded one in me. There's a wounded one in every one of us that's here, I'll tell you. And we're all wounded to different levels, and we all respond to that wound a different way. And that's what I'm noticing. In fact, we talked about that after the broadcast, hours later in the RLM chat. I think that we're hearing people respond to their wound through their woundedness. And I've been wounded. I tell you about it, but I only let that give me enough impetus to go find out what wounded me and how am I going to work to stop it. Not invent fairy tale analogies and fairy tale realities to cope. You understand that the people who speak about these fairy tale realities are not doing anything. And this is where I came to the conclusion. We really do have this keep thing. We really have to do what we have to hold our principle in the world, again, limited by the adverse effect it may have on another, and I mean a substantive one, not a feeling, an amenity-driven notion. And so, our mind is being affected by these chemicals. I told you this is a serious problem. It's going to be expanding. Here's another area they're going to report. I'm not going to, I want to read it, but I don't want to read it. There's really interesting stuff inside these. They talk about this chemical. They talk to you how it affects you, where it affects you. And all I say is look at that reality that they're telling you. Admit that this is at least this much of the truth. They're not telling you the whole truth, right? They're just telling you a little bit of it. But see the systems in your body and how it affects you. And this is okay with the government. Now, what world does that make sense is what the other question is. Now, how you respond to that either is you make up fairy tales or you get rubber has to meet the road. This is where we get to the cricket thing. Or the proper, not just you get interested to research and all of a sudden I'm knowledgeable about all the world's knowledge. Big deal, I'm telling you, big deal. I used to be there. I used to be, I told you this. Somehow what was the game? I don't even remember what the game was. Jeopardy was a TV thing. I can't stand the song anymore. One day I said, why do I know all this stuff? How can I know so much about and play a game? I don't remember the name. It was a little game board. If you answer questions right, you go around and how could I figure out so much about the game to know the game and answers and how to manipulate the condition? I had no more power than throwing the dice, but somehow you have an ability to manipulate the game. That's an interesting insight. But I said, why do I know all this? Oh, Trivial Pursuit. I can say the Trivial Pursuit. Why do I know this stuff? What purpose is it? And for where I was at the time, a lot of it had no purpose because everyone around me had no purpose in it. There was no knowledge. And at the time, it was not too much more to think about. We were all that was right before I started to get aware that there was a whole other reality we were being fed and that it wasn't really what we were told. Way on, this is early on now. Pushing the fringes of the 3 decades. Things just stopped adding up. Well, a lot of times I wasn't in places where we got this medicated water. But here's the truth. Truth is coming out. Unsafe level. The toxic chemicals are being found only for the 6 million. I always find this interesting. Seed drop for the 6 million that were, the Holocaust. And I find it interesting. They continue this number even though it's been agreed that it's far less if it was at all the Holocaust. Everyone knows what we're talking about here. Why 6 million? Could have been any number here, but why they picked that is another propaganda. Again, let's just look through it. I want you to see that they are agreeing that they are poisoning you. And this is like the Clean Water Act. Industry has the right to pollute the water only so much, as long as, and if they pollute it more, all they have to do is tell the government that they polluted more, and that in the law, when you go read it, is enough. Now, it's not carte blanche. They don't let you just destroy the water system, but they have provision, licenses, the ability to, underneath the legalism of protection of the state, to permit a criminal act. See, any pollution would be, actual intended pollution would be a crime to water. I mean, you just don't do that. There's people downstream as well. And ironically, the miner gets blamed for having, be blamed underneath the pollution law, and what the miner creates is not pollution at all. In fact, as we've done the research for many, many years now, this, what you see coming from a mining operation, as bad as you might prejudicially claim it is actually a public necessity. That brown water you see coming down the river from a miner is actually a public necessity. It's right in the law, if you know what you're looking at, if you know how to understand what you've been told. Now, you won't hear that in many places, and I wouldn't have known it until I saw it written. And that's why I say the black and white is so powerful, especially when it was done prior to the 1900s. There was a different mindset then. Just after the 1900s, it starts to change, and then you see how fast into the stinking abyss it goes. So we hold on to the older black and white. It's not old law. Why? Why is it not old law that can be changed? Because, as I tell you, this is property disposal law. It's been conveyed out of control of the government, who had the obligation to convey it to private productive use. And so the productive use of mining water, however it looks when it comes out, is a public necessity. It's some other things, too. They state it right in the law. Now, everyone's going to be, not everyone, but lots of people say, oh, acid mines. No, that's a bacteria. That bacteria that the miners found because the bacteria went into the rock and pulled out through its acid, bodies, oozing bodies, to dissolve the rock, to eat the minerals that were in the rock that it needed to live on, is where acid water comes from. And the miner just comes along on its little dead bodies and collects them up, thinking that he's doing something for society because it's a public necessity. And then the eco-terrorist ignorant comes along and blames him for the acid water. There's biology that does that, folks. It's fascinating how little bit we understand some of the time, and you point the wrong the finger at you point your finger at the wrong party, if you can call them a party, the wrong producer, and now you become a false witness. And here these chemicals come in our mind. They come to toxic chemicals. They interfere with our body systems. They cloud our mind, and we think we're clear about how we're going to approach our problems. And I'm suggesting to you, I don't know how I escaped some of it, but I did. I just know I did, because we act completely different. We don't make much of any excuse at all. In fact, if we find an excuse, we figure out how to get around that excuse. And a lot of times, I've told you, it's nice to be lazy. I'd like to just stop, but there's something else pressing, and I can't. So we're given wrong information, and we're given it into systems that have been polluted, that they're coming in every time now to tell you that even the government-supplied water systems are toxic. It's not just a little bit of dirt here, folks. This is toxic, they said. You have to understand what they're telling us. And you're trying to think you think through that. So this is another layer of insulation that they put around you that you may or may not be aware. And I suggest if you're underneath it and you don't know you're underneath an influence of something, you cannot even address it. That's another style of cluelessness, the inability to come to some independent thought. And here you're functioning. You're what they call the high functioning idiot. Yeah, but you're not functioning at your total capacity. And I'm not going to blame the government on this, but they're not stopping it. So you have to know it so you can protect yourself. And so we were also talking about things that they allow upon us. We talked about the Florida spraying and the Zika thing. I'm just going to touch it quickly because I think John Rappaport has some interesting statements about this. More of his research that you really kind of look at. The Zika fraud leads to toxic mosquito spraying and autism. So not only do they not have a proof about Zika virus causing this microcephaly, that the Brazilian and the Argentina scientist says is caused by the insecticide that they use, the larval side, sorry for the pause, again, the toxic mosquito spraying. They don't care that they're putting something toxic out, and now there's studies that show that it causes the autism. You see, this is like a focus. If you even do the vaccines, all this stuff, you start seeing there's a diminishment of your mental capacity. And I'm touching on this, and I wanted to be very gentle on this. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying any one of you is any particularly affected by it. The real possibility is here, as I look out and see 99.9% of people either can't respond or don't respond and will accept responses that are not necessarily good for them. And part of that is really just the reaction, when you get your thumb smashed, you pull it back. You just want the pain to stop. But we have to check all of this. This has to be checked in us. This is we have to fight our nature. But John Rappaport comes on with some very interesting discussions here. He also points out an interesting thing that for those of you that are looking to pick up evidence to go address certain matters, let's say on this viruses generally, he brings up another interesting point that I'm going to have in the blogcaster for you to read. and look at for what it has, and look at for the information it has as work toward evidence that you can build in your proof, your what I call the bag of law of any of subject matter. Your bag of proof, be it the law or facts, that show that what's being presented to you is essentially a fraud. It's essentially a fraud. And if it's done in an official capacity, I've explained to you that's a felony. And you each have to go to your state law, to your state code, and find that felony. It's underneath probably your penal laws or your crime acts. Find your state law that says an official, some official coming to commit or omit to do some act that he had a duty to do, or hand the title of remedy or duty over to somebody else to affect you. That's a felony. It's the 2 felonies, actually 4 felonies. I keep forgetting this one. The omission to do brings up the second side, because if you don't do what's required, you're omitting to do what's required. You got 2 felonies sitting right there. So he brings up, John Rappaport says, what you'll never read about virus research fraud. The takeaway on this, and don't just listen to the takeaway and say, okay, that's the answer and go. You really have to see how he gets through this and then make your mind work to order up in summary bullet point proofs that you might want to sit down and take notes for and stick somewhere, even in your computer on a notepad, and make sure to go backing up your stuff. But what you don't know, his analysis is how you go about what real science is in a summary way on going through another researcher's discussion on what is a valid investigation of a virus and what it takes what it takes technically in laboratory to do in order to have the authority to claim a virus exists. And the takeaway is that that's not being done right, and it is being used, the lie of that is being used against you. So there's the felony right there that we talk about going to CDC and responding to these agencies. When you see them come out with something that's wrong and you can put it into let's say a contract sense, unconscionability, fraud, there's all kinds of these things that make a contract void or voidable even. Voidable puts the question on the court to decide. That's kind of I don't like working in that. Well, you find a void condition. Now that eliminates what they're doing, and then you go after them again. You have the burden to throw that on them and prove it. So that's ours to do. But when you find out that they're not even identifying a virus at all, and this goes back to our HIV/AIDS condition, where you see they didn't really identify a virus. They just looked at the clinical test is not looking at a virus. It was what the technician subjectively believed he was seeing in your response to what you're dealing with, and how you deal with that technician, and what your responses are to the environment. It was a subjective determination, nothing objective here. So again, objective facts are written down, and that's the rule of evidence that's required, and it has to be those facts have to be there has to be no way that they can be defeated. And you have to have a certain couple of thoughts in your mind on how someone may come at you to try and get them defeated, and you have to have the answer for that. Again, this is a participation sport. You're literally in hand-to-hand combat here. And a lot of people don't want to get into it that much, and they don't think they had to, and I don't like it. I don't like having to do it, but I figured if you find yourself in a battlefield, you're either the prisoner or you're the combatant that they've made you to be. And they don't like the combatant. They call them all kinds of names. So you either get in it or you don't. You either are the victim to it, and I don't know what you're talking about no more. In other words, when you get into it, when I'm talking with people, what we do, we're talking about how do we accomplish the next task, not what's going on in the weather and all the chemtrails that we can see up there, but can't do much about. I can do stuff about other things. Once I get done with that, maybe those people will be gone and I won't see that other thing. But this gives you an insight what you'll never read about virus research fraud. Well, the word fraud is the door open to detect any report, opinion, decision, reference, exhibit that you might run across that some a government agency or official authority is using to hurt you or impose something upon you. In other words, commit that felony without the right to do so and interfering with your abilities. And so we have those things have to be written. These fraud facts have to be written. You just don't allege it's fraud. So you hear he he just writes that title. That don't mean nothing to me. I have to go read inside the story that he's writing, his report, on how he came to that proof. And if you look at what he's done, you can line it. You don't tell the story like him. See, the rule in the statement for complaints is you make a concise and summary statement of facts. A lot of people don't understand that doesn't take that much, and they want to go on and on and on, tell their life history and life story about their case. No, you prove that in evidence in the court. All you have to do is tell the court enough, or an administrative agency, or whoever, a code enforcement, enough to let the facts out of the wrongdoing and the law that showed that they ought not have done, and that's known or should have known. That's now civil as well. And if you can, I always try to envelop the larger society at large. And this is where we get to the ability to affect extraordinary remedies that I keep telling you about are so important. And as I think about it, I heard, and I didn't hear much about it, so excuse me if I have this wrong. This is just a generality again. This is the danger about what I do here, just so off the cuff. Ron Stevens said something about filing a lawsuit and speaking about it through harassment of someone else. How you go about doing that is for you have to bring the cause of harassment or whatever your evidence brings. You bring summary statements for how the elements applied to you, and then as a subset of facts, in a narrow statement of sub-fact statements, you say, and as a pattern of activity, we can see this also happened to this guy. And now you put out the facts that you can find out in the public documentation. You don't just tell a story. You line and reference and include, by incorporation and reference, that those set of paper facts you can resort to that someone reading the complaint can look at, that are official, that are prima facie the fact supporting your contention that there's a pattern of activity that goes on in the government that is not right, that follow contrary to law, and they've done it at least once before. And this little fact set is an offer of proof in the complaint to support an element of that point. And then you get to say, after you say, and this has been done as a practice, custom and practice, then you get to say, well, I'm suing for, which is required in these remedies, extraordinary remedies. I have to tell the government, the judge, so-called, the criminal in chief right there, you have to tell them then you're doing it essentially for the public good as well, because this is a universal policy that affects others, those similarly situated. You'll see all this when you even do a wiki research on what extraordinary remedy of injunction. You'll see these requirements sitting right there, and that's all you have to do to adjust it, but you have to affect it. He says that this is research fraud. You have to see how he gets there. In your paperwork, and this addresses any fraud, okay? This is what they do. The fraud of impressing you with authority is a fraud. That's a felony, so it's a fraud felony. So until we get to this point, we clear our mind, despite the poisoning and the toxicity, and we start communicating correctly on point, instead of responding through our wounded self, we're really going nowhere. We'll be grasping at straws like I see people doing. And this is not a judgment, and these are just figurative terms. I don't really put a lot of, these are serious and important, but they're not pointed to anyone for anything. It's just the discussion of how we describe this condition. So don't take it personal, anybody. Well, if you're not person, then you can't, right? And if you're a man, as Ron says, stand up and take responsibility. That's absolutely what I'm saying. I've been saying, and I think we both say the same thing. It's almost, we just say the similar thing, very same almost, but similar, different ways. And I think that's important because it communicates to different people. Did you know that virus research has a fraud element? Did you know how to identify that? I'm asking you in my talks to you, I'm asking you to do more than just complain. You have to identify the elements of the fraud. You have to take a little bit more work than researching on the internet. And that certainly is case by case specific, just like they tell us the case by case rights. That's why they do that. Except that extraordinary remedies, you can speak for the whole of society when you prepare it correctly. So you speak through your harm, and then you reference another to get you to the policy and custom that's contrary to law that affects all those similarly situated, such as this one guy here that I put in here. I got some proofs of elements of the affidavits, or not affidavits, but affidavit would be all right, but public records here to show the court I'm coming with this to prove my element. You don't have to discuss the entire thing. You just bring the proof, the outcome proof, on a piece of paper that says, this is what I'm saying is substantiated primarily by this evidence. I'll flesh out more for more total discussion in the court case before a jury. You don't have to discuss all that in your complaints, in your responses to these agencies. In other words, like I've said, if you find the law is being violated, you just have to cite that. You don't have to go forward. If someone's responding to you and they cite something contrary to law, you just cite that they're contrary to law, and like we have done. I mean, this is not like I'm talking out just opinion. As soon as someone comes, we had a 3 or 4 page letter come to us through channels to look at. It was a response by an administrator. Everyone wanted to go off on the deep end and answer all these things, 4 pages of stuff, and I looked at the first sentence. I said, his premise is all messed up. Let's just answer that. The answer back to that was, when you can get the premise correct, the law that you're using correct, I'll read the rest of the document. That worked, folks. That was it. That's all that had to be answered. That guy got a rude awakening, and that he better be a whole lot better and more right than he had been. And we didn't have to answer 4 pages of stuff. You find the first fatal flaw, and you just have to stay right there. Fix that, and maybe we'll move on. So this is what I'm talking about. If you find, let's say in this case, virus fraud or fraud of any nature, and you have the proof of the failure of the elements of the failure that conduces, it makes itself a fraud or an abuse or whatever violation of law, that fraud aids and abets, that you just delineate that. But you have to know that. And so John Rappaport goes through this. I thought it was important. To me, it's just the way you kind of look at this stuff. He does a good job of that a lot of times. Again, I'm not saying take his word for it. I'm saying look at what he's saying and go prove out what he's saying to be the truth. And if you can, get your documentation to prove it. If you're interested in vaccine technology, if you're interested in virus and laws, police power. See, this attacks the police powers excuse, doesn't it? This is the main thing we have to start doing. Is they'll say they got to do it for the community, and you can say, well, not that. Fraud's not good for the community, but you have to prove the fraud. I'm trying to, again, these are kind of nuts and bolts. I'm trying to show you. I'm not interested in the virus fraud thing. I've already talked about it. I can tell you all about it. I'm not focused on it right now. Some of you might be. And even if you're not, I'm telling you, I took counsel of the way he put this together, even though to be able to identify, again, and remind myself, this is some of the elements of this report are how you do it, how you pull the fraud together. Refer to experts that are actually knowledgeable, not just experts. Experts say. No, the ones that are doing the actual valid research on it. You don't back yourself up with another expert. So, what I'm building up to here is that we're diminishing our capacity. It's planned that way. The government knows you're being fed toxic things. We kind of know this. I just want to point out that they denied it up until now, and I told you before they were going to come out and tell you more. Well, here they are. All this is all consistent with what I'm saying. I'm trying to do a self-confirmation to show we're on the right path. Not that I'm right, but I'm on the right path based on things I've read that I apply in the world that ought to be happening. And if I can predict that, anticipate that, and then it happens, okay, I know that path, right? I'm not standing on that path. I'm knowing that's what they do. The beast is what it is. I have nothing wrong in my interpretation of that. In other words, a self-check. When you get on the internet, you can balance this against everybody. And when they fail their self-check you impose through your view, a rational self-check, not your opinion on them, but, well, you were supposed to bring this element by this proof, and you didn't. What you're saying now fails, or it has a large chance of failing because you can't go with a piece of paper to prove what you're saying. Then you're going to see the problem. You're going to see the problem too late. But if you see it ahead of time in them, you can help them out if they'll accept it. Which I'm asking you all. So I come every week just to tell you, hey, check yourself. Bounce what ideas you have off against what I say. If you think I have anything for you to say, to tell you, I think I do. I'm pausing here. I think I do. I'm letting all the people tell me, no, you don't. You know what I'm talking about. You can't fight the system. You can't do this. You can't do that. What's the sense of going to the system? No, I'm saying attack the system with these kinds of things. If there's a fraud out there, you have to prove it. John Rappaport says the virus research fraud. Look at Zika. They can't even find a virus. This is why. You have the bullet point elements. Why? When you want to go address the CDC or you want to go address your doctor or your local commission or California wants to do adult injections without any say or taking away all prohibition, you have to have the proof to show that they're committing a felony against you to do that. It's beyond what you can't just talk to these people. I was going to say anymore. Okay, I'll say anymore. It really has been this way. You really just can't talk to these people. You have to make the record. One of the first things I'll talk to someone when they say they just made a phone call to someone, did you make a written record and send it back to them of the conversation and the points that you are accepting? Most 99.9% say no, and I insist. Write the letter. And then the next question seems to be within a moment is, well, how do you make a record? It's like no one listens to me really. I'm asking you really listen to what I'm saying. If there's no record, they don't want to put something on paper, you make the paper and you send it in. And if you're smart, you're paying a little bit of bucks, return receipt requested, so that you get an evidence trail. And if they don't respond to that, they've accepted it. Most of the time they got their foot in their mouth anyway. Now you're building your evidence if no evidence exists. So let me move on to what started this little bit here in me this week, which I don't normally do. And again, I'm trying to be as gentle as possible. It's not a judgment. We all act and do our things. And some of these people I admire in different ways. But as everybody needs to be checked, and that includes me, though I say, I'm always asking if I can't be wrong once, but if I am, I want to know about it. It's easy to fix a few things than it is to disregard them and find you're in error later when it really counts. But some people sent me a video. And it's of Jerry Day, and I really appreciate his thoughts, his organized presentation. He could lay out you just took down some of his points on the points that are well stated. You could lay out a complaint on what he says. So I appreciate how he lays out in oral fashion the subject matter of what he says. But something came back to me, a couple people. This was about vaccines and smart meters, and Jerry Day, I guess, is focused on smart meters, and importantly so. I mean, this is one of the other detriments. But he says how to say no to vaccines and smart meters. Now, like I said, I don't want to say he's wrong. What I want you to be aware of, and what came through each email to me, was referencing to what he calls the opt-out contract being a scam, but how you respond to that. Now, his opt-out, he's absolutely correct that when they send you an opt-out for these wireless or these smart meters, that it's whoever authored the document's going to take the benefit. That he says you can't enter into their paperwork. He's absolutely right on that. So again, I'm agreeable to a lot of this. What I was what struck me, if I could say scared me for y'all, was that you go to his website, and I won't have a link to this. You have to get to the video. You should listen to what he says. He has freedomtakers.com, I think, is what his website. Well, there was a traffic, I tend to get on the highway thing, so lots of people respond to me on highway issues. And there was a traffic thing he said he presents on his website. If you do this should answer a response against the government revenuer coming in a traffic situation. And you read through that list that he has, and it's all common sense. It's all written in the spirit of non-dependence, and I can have the right to do what I want to do. But it references nothing. It doesn't reference any. My first problem was it didn't reference any actual substantial code, which he could have. I mean, I can see that he could have, but he doesn't. But my problem was for most of you all who, not a judgment, you still have paperwork that you have involved with this. You are exhibiting, and you will naturally exhibit evidences of your complicity with the crime against you. in the form of a driver's license or in the form of an ignorance of not responding what I would call more correctly, but that will get you in trouble because you're dealing with a military occupation force and not a peace officer. So you always have to understand the duality and the danger that I speak in and why I say I'm handing you a loaded gun and you're a little kid. You're a little goat. You're going to shoot your mother, father, or yourself because we aren't that aware of a larger dynamic. You are if you listen here behind the woodshed. That you have to be very careful for. What's the problem with this list is what I was looking at. If people, Jerry Day suggests, and in a moral sense it's correct, but you're not dealing with a moral entity or beings or agency. This is our big disconnect. That if you use that list the way he presents it, saying with the caveat to you, that if you feel you need to identify yourself and do this other thing, then you will do that and then still present this document. Your terms, your conditional acceptance. That's a dangerous thing for y'all, folks. You need to go see this. You need to see the video and take what he says on the good stuff, and like the opt-out clause, the fact that the author of the smart meter opt-out clause is a criminal and trying to get you to agree that they have a right and that they otherwise would have a right. He's exactly right about that. But we jump over to the website and he says this ought to help you, and then gives a caveat about, well, those of you that want to have to identify yourself, and there's a way to do that without being in the state is my other problem with this. He is setting up, and not because he wants that, I think he knows, he's not intentional, he's setting you up for a fall. Let's go back to the basics. If you have a document in your pocket called a license, what is that? What is that license so called? Is that the license? No, see, they even have us missing the point. That's evidence of the application. The valid application has been filed, and it has on that little evidence your signature. So if you have to identify yourself, and you have to use that document being a driver's license, or an ID card which comes from the very identical authority, Commerce, to get those, you have had to put a signature on a document which agreed that you would be subject to the very jurisdiction the notice he's telling you to file would cause a demand upon the officer to declare back to you. Is a fallacy. If you give proof of your identity through any state document, that includes a license plate on your car, or they have a license plate on your car and they come and stop you because of whatever reason, they are presumed to be in legal right to ask you about yourself, and you are constrained in the state because of your action before, which is presumed to have agreed, which you did when you did your license. It says, I agreed to be under the motor vehicle laws of the state and all the other laws and the penalty and all this other stuff. You signed your name to that. That if you identify yourself through any state means, if you go back and look at what that list of demands you're supposed to be, the reservation of rights you're making, you gave all that up in your signature to get the paper you're identifying yourself with in Commerce. I'm asking you to reconsider that. I'm asking you don't do that. Not that way. If you got that problem, I said you can do it better. Why don't you take that list and maybe break it down, because it's quite extensive, and start approaching the agency that you've agreed to come under their laws and say, wait, did you commit a fraud upon me and a felony where you didn't disclose to me that I was actually using the highway by right and the use granted to me by Congress? Ask one simple question. They're not going to give you an answer, but at least you got yourself in the door a better way than signing your name over and presenting a plate that is prima facie evidence of regulation by the state. And then when the officer comes to enforce what you've agreed to, start arguing with him over the demand that you're going to make for his subject matter jurisdiction. Is not what I told you the co-owner of the mine and my friend did the other day. He didn't have a state plate. He doesn't have state paper. There's nothing in commerce that they could find. They fabricated a jurisdiction under the pretext in order to do what we later find is a money laundering scheme that rises to the so-called, the just us system. Understand what I'm telling you when I say, and stay within what I'm saying before we jump too far. If you follow Jerry Day's caveat to identify yourself, and that identity happens to be any way that the officer can fabricate to say you were in the state, and you don't challenge that one at the time, all your notice to him that you'll see on Freedom Takers, I think it is, .com, is, well, it's what? It's moot. Because you've already agreed. You've either agreed implicitly or presumptively or with your hand in signature. And that's a dangerous thing to start doing. First of all, you have the wrong idea. You start sounding like the Bundys. You sound like all the people I saw before doing this. And can't really say there's an ultra-right way when you're up against a criminal, but like I say, it's more better what you got to do than what I see being suggested. So everyone that listens to me that's seeing this video get passed around, there's some good points that Jerry Day says. His action regarding traffic, however, is dangerous. And I'm saying that with the presumption that 99% of y'all are complying with what you thought you had to do and what you're imposed to do. This is an extortion. So I'm not judging any of this. I'm just saying, take yourself out of this and just look at the reality, this bullet points of your actions. See, everyone wants to say they haven't done much and won't do much, but they've already done enough. And they don't think to undo that stuff. Okay, so be very careful. I mean, I'm with Jerry Day. I mean, the guy is at one level I feel, I don't know what my emotion is about even critique. I guess it's a critique. Take it as a critique. Not about him, not even his intention, none of that. It's just that information that's given out and the good intention to try and help people is honest. It's truthful. But be careful of that you're not being told to jump in a spot that actually is over a cliff. And so I hope I've stated that. I know you haven't seen anywhere. When you go there, you should see. I want you to do the work now. They're clicking. I want your investment in this. Because this is an example of what I've been telling you about not doing things the more correct way. If you are in the system, I think, I've told you before, it's almost more, in my mind, more powerful now, because now you are protected to the limit of the legality. You have limited liability. So you can test this. Without really fear, but if you don't test it, then you're just agreeing. But to go in with that stuff and then present this document that's supposed to be a demand for the jurisdiction and the demand for his authority, and am I free to go? Well, no, none of that. He doesn't have to answer any of that because he's just got you to identify yourself through state documentation or imply a name he can find that is in state documentation. Wow, how do you give them a name without identifying yourself in that? Well, you got to slow down and think about all this. This is a real dynamic. They've got it pretty well worked out, but there's answers to it, and I give it to you across the board. I just don't give it to you in a way. And part of this is on purpose to you folks. I don't want to give you like here's the bullet point silver bullet. There's nothing. You have to work all these things through for yourself. When you finally do work it out right, you start to see what I'm saying. And you see it through your truth. Not because it's the truth, it's the truth that you need based on objective response to what you see. That objective response is outside of you. I don't tell you this because it's my opinion. It's what I see how this machine, you put your signature on a line and the machine starts to run. It's like putting a penny in a machine. I mean, a gumball every time will drop out. And it does that all the time, the same thing over and over. And there's someone back there filling in all the gumballs for you. What a great benefit that is. So my caution was, and I thought about this, I didn't really want to touch too much on it. And I think I'm talking esoteric enough not to get anybody in trouble here. And I'm almost talking like a little bit of fear in you, because I want to put more concern about your better statement and your better step. Not a fear, but I want to put the apprehension. Be careful on taking people's advice, even mine. I have no problem with saying that at all. Don't think you'll find a fault in what I say, but that's not for me to decide. Because we ultimately the people, the men and women, don't have limited liability. And so, you have to take that responsibility. And I didn't want this one. This really kind of bothers me a lot. I see this a lot. It sounds plausible and reasonable, and it's morally, yes, let's rally around this concept. In application, it's a setup that all the good that you might do is defeated by the evil that's been set up around you. And that's not a saying you're defeated. You just have to consider that battlefield that you're in. It's really that simple. Rethink that. So I think I've spent enough time there. I hope. Understand the moral side of what's supposed to happen, but understand the application of that's going to come different in the face of a criminal. In other words, you just don't walk up to the bank robber with a pistol and tell him to stop, put the money down, and walk out. Or go to jail, or even more, arrest yourself. How ridiculous does that sound? And that's as ridiculous as this is to me, that you sign a piece of paper, you identify yourself with a name in the state, and they can find it on paper. They make the paper evidence, and then all of a sudden you start yelling at the cop to demand jurisdiction, demand his authority, demand if you're free to go or free to stay. And I told you, they just say, no, you're not free to go, and it's over. That's not the answer. That's on there too. It establishes nothing because you defeated yourself in the first point when they can identify you in the state. Here's the distinction between how I've done it, how my people that know me do it. There is no outward and no presentation of anything in the state. It's a quote, in the state. It means something. It's a very particular state. I don't want to say the next thing because all y'all will lose it on what the next word. The one word, you'll lose it and forget everything I just said because, we're focusing on that. So I'm not going to say it. I got to anticipate even for you all that are listening. You run with these concepts without settling down and understanding some of these things aren't so big a deal, but they got their place. That we have to understand what we do, wherever, right or wrong, is used against us in a court of law. They tell us that. And so when you go and you form any way that they can identify you in the state, anything that their state has identified as a harm, they will presume upon you that authority. So that little list of demands that you think it is, your opt-out for the traffic, your protective device you think it is, it's not. It's just showing you have no capacity to understand, actually. They're looking at it as, why did you do that? Why did you sign and say you would agree to come under the laws of the state and then fight us? And I don't have many people that I know that understand how that works and how this happens. And because of that, there's very few in a number that actually start to put in the more proper way to start to gum the system up for what it is. You're literally just outing it's a financial scheme at one level. You're outing a money laundering scheme. It's not that difficult. But you can't do half steps. You can't straddle the fence here. And when you make your decision in the one direction, you have strict liability and they'll treat you strictly. There's no doubt about it. And so you have to understand that, and you try to have protections in place for that. I've talked about all that before. I've really talked about a lot of this. But in this particular case, Jerry Day talks about opt-out contracts, and the really important point I got was that the power companies that write the contracts, write it in their favor. And they actually impute to them the right to have supposedly put on you what they were trying to do all along when you use it. And I've already told you, don't use the government's forms. That includes the power company. That includes anybody, any agent, certified agent in the state. You can't use their forms. You may have to speak to their restrictions, their obligations of production, but not in their way. You speak to it in your way, as I told you, as I identified again in filing a risk management paper for the notice of a tort potential of the intended tort claim. They have certain requirements put on them. The state has federal impositions on it. If you thought that there was a state sovereignty, forget it. And it's all about the funds. It's all about the liability on the limited liability fund side, which is all fabricated. So you're living, anybody can see this is fictional, but how do you deal with that? It's going to deal with you. I think I saw it in the UCY chat. Somebody, it might have been Otto, saying something about, you may not be interested in war, but the war will be interested in you. Yeah, this is what it's really. That's something I would agree with Otto on. Absolutely. Your silence is used by these people that are warring against you. So let me move on to another thing. Again, a lot of this stuff overwhelms me. I can't even deal with it because I just see a lot of people running around with like chickens with their head cut off. They got all the facts. They can lay it out, but they think like YouTube is the place to get it out, and that answers it. And then they call it a call to arms. Actually, a call to phones is the only answer I see. So I responded in this one. This bothered me too. This bothers me because we got innocent until proven guilty people being abused in jail. If I could say it that kind of neutral. That does, when people stop talking and start actually putting their substantial on-point points, bullet points to paper in an order that's recognized as a cause for a remedy, would, instead of all the talking I see, 46 minutes of yakking, would, in the same amount of time, been a complaint, multiple complaints for multiple purposes, to be sent back into the system and call out the abuses that are going on. That I don't see happening. And something I don't remember now how it came to me. May have been another email now. I'm actually losing the connection of all this while I talk, but not important. I got it. And thank you very much for sending these things. Sometimes I have time I can look at them, sometimes I don't. And this time I had a little bit of time I could look at it. And it's important because, I've already talked about the Bundys. I've said that they are good-meaning people, but they're doing things a lot wrong. And they're continuing to do it that way. Now, in this case, Ryan Bundy, he had a bullet in his shoulder or somewhere. Remember, that bullet was not supposed to be being fired. This is such a big deal about the FBI not supposed to be there firing bullets. And then he knows it. They're trying to get that bullet. Now, the government's claiming it's only shrapnel. But up until recently, apparently by this another video here that I just received, a link, you'll get this in the Blogcaster, they have been they've been threatening him and setting up and doing mind abuse, mental abuse to him, threatening him to go take that thing out of his body. And he's saying, well, if you're going to do that, I want an attorney, and I want a third party to witness that extraction and the deposit with an attorney or a third party, that evidence. Because if that happens to be the bullet, I think and know it is, we've got a problem on the government side. And I'm saying, for you, listeners, looking and caring about this, absolutely. So, what bothered me about this is the same type of good faith, wanting truth and justice in people, communicating the alert. And my response to it was, of all the thousands of people that know of this condition, when you hear that what's going on to him, with all the thousands of people going on, do you mean that there's no one that can write proper paper to bring out the abuses and call to task all the ones that are causing harm in this matter? There's not one other in the whole of the country that can write proper paper? So that's our first problem, it seems to me. And there may not be anybody else. And I've told you, I'm way past able. I just have no more room on my plate. I got stuff I keep picking up off the floor to keep balancing. I got more pins I'm also juggling. I just have no more time. But what I see here, the evidence of the absolute affront you can put to the government that nobody is doing, and we would just hear yak, talk, hang up the phone. The only call to arms is to call the sheriff, who has disconnected their call number. Think about this. Now, if I'm looking at this as a tactician, and I find out that the communication line has been broken, why would I call my army to go make phone calls when I know that there's a whole lot of other remedies? So this is taking information, good-natured people, good-hearted people, maybe presumed innocent people, surrounded by people that care about them, completely helpless in doing anything that might cause a stir. The actual stuff. As I told you, what Ammon Bundy did wrong, as I had evidence to me, through the lawyer's website of him talking about Article 3 courts and still not challenging that court. And this now is a pervasive wound that the government has that at any time can be brought up. And so, in this, Ammon Bundy's being abused. He's being threatened. They're essentially dieseling him around. The marshals are doing that. The marshals are calling the county jail. The jail roughs him up. Attempted murder, in my mind, on the evidence. I would charge attempted murder against the jail and the sheriff. I'd have one group of people attacking the jail and the sheriff over attempted murder and some other things when you hear if you hear what's going on with him, what they're doing. I would be having one group of people attack the judge and the marshals because the marshals act under the direct order of the judge. And I would allege the very thing that Ammon Bundy and Ryan hasn't done, who've accepted the jurisdiction when they had nothing to say, when they had the duty to say it to avoid the jurisdiction, the pre-plea remedy and avoidance. I'd say that judge had no found authority in the record that had jurisdiction, competence, or capacity over this matter, and ordering the marshals to torture someone the government wants evidence from to tamper with. So she becomes an extension. I think it's a woman judge in this. If not, whoever, all the judges, Jane and John Doe is what you do. But let me go through some ad hoc. These are how I go and analyze when I'm doing something. Well, you'll just hear something here. Maybe hopefully it'll help somebody. As I listen to these videos, if I can, and hopefully, and I thank you very much for those of you that send me a link to a video and then say start listening here. Thank you very much, because that focuses my attention, and I don't have to listen to a 2-hour program when it's what you want to show me is right in one little section. That helps me a lot. I can just tell you, this helps me a lot. I can focus on it, and we don't have to worry about it. I don't have to spend the time, because if I start kicking into something and it sounds ridiculous to me, I may not make it to the end where you want me to. So that's another point. So let me give you as I'm listening to it, you'll find this in the blogcaster, Ryan Bundy afraid for his life, update from the family. I believe it's his wife that calls in. And excuse me if I don't have the exactness of who these people are and all that. To me, I lay it, there's people being hurt. That's all I need to focus on. They're just people being hurt. Now, how do we go about setting something up to help? It's not phone calls, folks. It's really not. Unless a phone call is to set up a meeting to establish evidence, phone calls are not going to do it. Unless phone calls are to try and get admissions of things that you can produce to paper to send in as the evidence you're going to need to support your statements of cause, forget your phone calls. And we do the phone call thing a lot, and then we make the record, and they don't like it because we get to make up what we believe the meaning of the phone call was. And I don't mean we make it up. I mean they will say what we need to have said. So we are the author of the evidence at that point. It's not a lie. It's not a fabrication. It's exactly what it was. But it's something that the phraseology will not come from the government to indict itself, will it? No. So phone calls are good for that side, but not just a phone call and harass. You got nothing else in your brain? Don't even waste your time. And why are you wasting your time? Why do you think that is doing something? Are you drinking some toxic water that thinks it's important just to make a phone call? Now they've shut their phone off. Boy, that's a problem on both sides. I'd use that, but the point is, I have to use it for a cause. So Ryan Bundy, and this is not anything to do with all that happened. This has to do with you have to understand how they're going to treat you, whether this is this serious when they put you in jail or how they harass you privately if they even don't have you in jail. You have to understand when you listen to this video, or it's an audio, YouTube of an audio. You have to be prepared. Why didn't they want to talk to us about torture and what they were doing to torture people at Abu Ghraib is the same reason you have to listen to this to understand how vile the system is against you. And I'm saying it's evidence you can use. If you're prepared with this, you have the nuts and bolts to come after them. If nothing else, with an organized groups of people, you make this such a cat fight, if I can just reduce it down to something kind of inert. It becomes a spectacle all by itself. And if you focus on the certain things, you expose the nature of the crime against everybody. So you got two options that happen for you. One is you actually might force him back into the rights they owe him, and you're going to let everybody know about it, and they understand how to do that. That's the example I keep telling you when you start to do it more right. Let me just go through, as I listen to a video that I start to hear has information for me, whether it be someone's statement of elements, some fact that they're disregarding, or how they're not responding to it, and I'm doing the analysis for me, and because I don't have connection to anybody, and I really, in a way, I would need liaisons because I don't have the time to be. I can't deal with all this. This just really is too much. But to me, it's lessons. All right, I take them as evidence of a thing. But in the meantime, I can formulate the remedies because I hear them speaking and nobody touches them. It drives me a bit nuts. But if no one's touching them, we are an oppressed people, folks. It's again the people that will wave the flag and speak to the Constitution and not know one point about how it effectuates yourself down in the streets and how to implement it, even through the corruption. Now, I wouldn't say that before we did our lawsuit and I had figured out how to out that. I gave you a clue when I said you attack the judge. Now, I didn't say attack the judge. You go after it in paper on the point of jurisdiction, establishment of the court, authority and power and capacity in that judge. And then the delegated lack of authority in the marshals to make the request with the jail and the failure and the malfeasance in office. There's another cause under the Constitution of Oregon of the jailer and the sheriff to not protect against the abuse of taking Ryan Bundy out of the jail or threatening to do whatever without telling him and then having just run him around town. See, the other thing about that is that they also mention in the tape, all the elements are there in what they talk about that are important. They just don't put it together in a cause. And that when they're running Ryan Bundy around for no good reason under the pretense and pretext of a hearing that will never happen, that's a fraud. It's now a felony extortion because they're taking away his right to defend for his trial. That they're taking away anyway when they treat him this way, which hasn't been argued, or not argument, it's presented as a countervailing force against the abuse, which should, under habeas corpus, another remedy, more than just attacking the parties for felonies and civil rights and all this other stuff, habeas, the same list of things, summary points, would give Ryan the court that's supposed to be above the law, not above the law, but in the law, but above wrong, and the jailer, the obligation and duty to be above wrong, is not, that has been in the past, enough to kick them out on a habeas. You can't abuse someone you're going to send to trial and you be the one that's alleging the crimes. I don't know why people don't put this together even as a statement in a letter of frustration. They don't say it this way. I'm saying, well, even in the next step, they haven't got to the letter of frustration on the point, let alone to writing it up in an organized formal cause, which has a number of elements of remedy that are available here. But let me go through, as I listen to the audio, things start coming in my mind. And I'm really hesitant about doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because they're not, you have to understand, this is not even, I don't know what to say. This is not even information more than thoughts in my response. It's not been checked. It's not been proven. It's not been consolidated. It's not been perfected. In other words, what comes to my mind may not be the actual cause I'd be after, but it would give me the note to refer to what they said on the audio that I would then take that as an element to go find the actual thing I want to use. You have to understand this is the raw thought. Not anything you can use on its own without absolutely integrating it with a cause, all right? This is just me responding to the failures or the things that I can see that can be done when I hear the frustration in people's voice. It's something that I can't help not doing, but it's raw. You just have to know that. This is not something to just pen out and send in. You have to do a lot of deep things on this. But so I'll just go through my notes and we'll see how this touches some subject matter that and I'm not saying to do this, I'm just saying this is what came to my mind, that you have to be in your mind to think about, that gets us beyond just saying we need to call someone, that gets us to not do what we need to do. At least understand we are not helpless. even if we're not quite right, we can be a pain to these people. Real pain to these people. And then you find out all your groups of people going after them in different places, they have to take time from dealing with you. And then it becomes a question of, do they want to keep beating on him, or do they just stop doing that so that you don't keep beating on them? Taking up their time. I don't mean in frivolous phone call ways. I mean in things that other people, you start machinery in the system that has to be responded to. Or it outs itself for the criminal that it is, and that's, to me, that's good enough. You got the evidence. But it also puts you in a much more proper action. That here is my ad hoc, just typed out notepad response to this video. And I need to do it this way because I can't remember. I don't really engage in any way to hold the memory because I don't want to get involved. I don't have the time. I wouldn't do it justice, the real justice that I think is available to this. So we hear in the story that the marshals are calling the jail, and the jail is complicit in running Ryan around, and they're also giving him mental anguish over this evidence in his body that they want. And they're not talking to Ryan Bundy at all. They're not talking to him at all. They're not telling him why they're there. They're not telling him why there was a hearing that he never got a notice of. See, there's a way to also, when you hear that, if they don't have pieces of paper and pencils for him, he should be writing motions to clarify the order, calling the marshal to his cell for a hearing you were not given notice of. He should pen that immediately, put legal material on the top of it, send it to the jailer on what I understand is the kite, and say this has to go to the court immediately. He can just do that. Why doesn't he just do that instead of doing other things? So you get it on paper, not your opinion. Because this is what they put it. They put it in opinion, and then the camera don't work. And so, on the story, we hear the U.S. Marshals are there to get Ryan to be moved to a court hearing that Ryan has no notice of. My observation is the U.S. Marshals act for a culpable judge in court. In other words, the judge had to order the marshals there to do that. She or he either did that or didn't. If they're acting without the delegation, the marshals are culpable. You need a group to focus in on that. You need a group to focus in on the pair with the judge. I'm suggesting to you that court and judge on the record, there's no found jurisdiction, the capacity I told you before, so I don't have to repeat it. You challenge that, even if their order was there, that the judge had no right to do that. Certainly due process is a violation here to not give him notice and then demand his placement somewhere contrary to his rights. Tampering with evidence. Because of that thing in his arm, you see, because of what they're doing and how they're doing it, they're attempting to tamper with the evidence that would be showing the system's culpability. That the sheriff wants to kill, that the marshals want to kill, and certainly now the judge wants to kill for the prosecutor. What am I saying? We got collusion. You can allege that. It doesn't mean you can prove it, but you get it out, don't you? It's a reason on a piece of paper they can't disregard. It's certainly the summary elements of an abuse and a collusion that is now noticed to people more than just make a phone call, and no one has a cell in their head on what they're going to call it except for their emotion. Another next step. So tampering with evidence here becomes a big deal. Tampering evidence also criminally liable in the federal law. All right, so this is what you're looking at these points that you can formulate in your mind. When you're looking at something, you don't do the wrong thing, you do a better thing. Abuse ought to be sufficient to have him removed and released through a habeas, as I said before, implicating the court and judges are complicit in his abuse and mistreatment, judicial mistreatment, and being in control of the United States Marshal or under court direction. All I said before. I'm getting it stated to you as how the notes came to my mind to write, just type down. And again, it's not easy. I can't type, so I've got lots of mistakes I have to go through. The point is this comes out of me to do. It should be coming out of you in the same way when you try to respond to this criminality around us that we find. To me, there was a story about him being shoved by an officer downstairs at the same place and without cameras apparently on his time, that a week before the same officer threw someone down the stairs and he got hurt, damaged, and paralyzed, was evidence to me of attempted murder. You can allege it. If it wasn't on camera, you do the reverse. You said they knew or should have known that they have the duty to protect themselves, and it's tampering with evidence or failure to retain evidence that would show the lawfulness of their action at the stairs. Reverse the position. Work on their duty. They have an obligation to keep everybody safe. When he alleges that there was a harm, they have to show that he didn't do it to himself, at least. This failure of this evidence at the stairs, where they tried to shove him down, and they get him for, see, this directly attacks again, as I remember now, I don't have it on the notes, but they got him for resisting arrest there because he grabbed onto the rail to save himself. That's self-preservation when framed a different way. And so they are using the pretext of resisting arrest when he was in a self-preservation to get a violation that they can abuse him some more with. Should be a line item statement. As a result of them not having video and not showing that they didn't do something wrong, with an obligation to leave him alone and let him go peacefully to where the marshals were. Without all that evidence, it's conspiracy to defraud the intention of someone under the jail's care to impose physical torture under color of authority. His response in self-defense of not wanting to go down the stairs like the guy ahead of him the week before, which you create evidence that had happened, that this is a pattern of activity of this officer to hurt people. They said it in the video. I'm saying write it down as a line item element of what your cause is going to need support for. His self-preservation is a right to him. He can't they can't allow him to protect himself. If the attack, the assault, was unlawful, he had every right to defend himself. He is a presumed innocent man, isn't he? Even though that he's agreed to be a legal fiction in a territorial court. I can't stop that problem. He doesn't want to fix that for himself. Self-preservation to grab the rail after being pushed by the jailer is not resisting arrest or whatever, or countering some authority, whatever they have. I don't know what the charges are. They say it in the video. It's not important to me. I'm looking for the response. There's something that they talk about, but they don't write down. They don't put it in a cause, and they don't file it somewhere. There's in my mind, there's like there's 5 different remedies here, just in this alone, that if groups of people got on this that could write proper paper, they would cause the system so much trouble. You want to really be a patriot? You want to really be responsible and step up in the law? You want to spout the Constitution, or do you want to start doing what it provided for us to do? And then whine about it if you don't. I don't get that. Tampering with the evidence to exonerate and or condemn the acts of the officials. You presume it has to exist, and the non-existence is the destruction of it. That's tampering. That's a felony. Create the frame that makes the cause. Don't complain about it. Use these things in order to make your elements in cause. Attempted extortion or coercion to tamper with evidence to cover up evidence that the government actors committed crimes in zealously doing bad things to good people. Again, the presumption of innocence. They're destroying in their action cruel and unusual punishments that were not given to the government to be able to continue to do. Unless the jail can show it's self-inflicted, his harm is self-inflicted by proof, the onus is on the jailer to prove he didn't cause the injury shown or complained of when you say they did something to you. Now, a little thought come to my mind. You're going to have to anticipate that they're going to not like what you're saying here, and they're going to use all these legal rule technicalities to get out from having to expose that. You have to be well versed in how they're going to do that. Anticipate that they're going to do that. So again, as I told you, my notes are not proofs. They're not perfected. They're not even, I don't have statutory authority. I'm responding ad hoc as my mind responds to this stuff. I go back later and fill in my blanks. This was assault. They tried to get pushed down the stairs. It's assault when they beat him down under the claim of the false claim that he was resisting in some regard over something that had no lawful authority to have him moved. under the claim that the marshals had a hold on a demand on him. Assault. That's a crime. And then we have this guy named Sarge Sanders. He's got known to have assaulted others as well. So now you get to speak in the context of all inmates, those similarly situated, as evidenced as by this other guy that got hit by the officer being shoved down the stairs, not protecting himself, and now he's paralyzed. Same guy. Those similarly situated brings you into extraordinary remedies. They have names of people. They have to get more. That's fine. If you don't have the name, do that. Okay, on the paperwork, it's officer or jailer John Doe, deputy John Doe, justice judge whatever John Doe, Jane Doe. I put John and Jane Doe. One of our lawsuits, it wasn't a lawsuit more than a collateral attack on a war on tow. As I told you before, I said Judge and Jane Doe's, X through whatever. I didn't know how many I was going to run up against. The whole bar association, I figured. Just name a place in the document of the complaint. Get the evidence in writing. If you can't, make a space for it. You don't have to have it. You just got to say you're going to produce it. You can get it maybe in discovery. Anticipate discovery that's lawful. You have to have this all in your thoughts while you're real time looking at this. That's how kind of how I respond to it. Someone was mentioning that they were watching on a monitor. Well, watching on the monitor means that there was video evidence of that. And if it's not there, it's tampered with. All you have to do is get them agreeing on paper. Write it down that they said that. Get it filed in a more formal sense. You have now the evidence. You can stick in a complaint that says there was a monitoring of it. The failure of the videotape of which is tampering with the evidence to protect their felonies. Why can't people just say this instead of saying give the sheriff a call and they flick the switch on you? Purporting to court hearings to cause a movement and opportunity to claim more offenses and transfer and to create mental abuse. They were making these false things to move him around. My view, it was also making the opportunity to cause an interaction they can blame him for more wrongs for. Is unconscionable conduct. And so that was like the limit of what I kind of got. I know it's not proof, but what I'm saying is my mind works a little differently, it seems, than by the time I get to the end of this video and they're saying call the sheriff on a line they just said was already disconnected. That's not logical in the first place, and that's not effectual in the second place. And here I have a notepad with at least the rudiments of a cause that I know will attach to 5 remedies. And remember, you have state jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction. Okay, for all you naysayers, no, I'm not doing it to get justice in their system. I'm doing it to out the system. This is a different mentality that you have to approach this with. The habeas alone attacking the judge on a lack of found jurisdiction. The assumption of jurisdiction over the deprivation of pre-plea remedies and avoidance, that statement alone, put in a cause, is probably the biggest thing he can put forward right now, because it invalidates everything that they're doing if that judge can't show that she or he had any of that, or there was a lawfully established court. Again, by article of the Constitution. These things come from me just like automatically. If they're not coming from you automatically, I'm saying that's the chasm we the people have in fighting this battle. And I'm suggesting once you see this, the capacity to have a response in face of the oppression is flipped. I mean, in my mind, 180 degrees. That I just realized I'm sitting here. My eyes are bright. My eyeball not bright, but I mean, my eyes. I'm furrowing my forehead. And my eyes are big. What an opportunity I'm thinking here. This is not a burden. Yes, we're oppressed, but it's a battle that we can handle. And we can cause so much trouble for these people who won't establish and keep the law and keep the standards and the principles. It's not a joke, folks. We're not It's a crying shame that we're not doing it. You know, I mentioned before the jailer, the sheriff. A constitutional crimes claim for malfeasance is not a small deal. If you could have groups of people together, I think because of the lack of knowledge, you need more people together, but you really don't. You just need lots of groups of people that work together, working on different facets. You know, one group of people attacking that alone, exposing the crime within the jail, putting the light of 1,000 suns on this, that's never put on it, more than just complaining. Why are you making a phone call to the guy who's in malfeasance of his office? That makes no sense to me. And this is what we do, and then we whine about being ineffectual. Now, the other point about having lots of small groups of people is they look at it, remember, you got to look at it from both perspectives. They look at it that a lot more people are involved and more properly getting after them. To them, that's a serious problem. Remember, we said long years ago, I used to reference this more, like one phone call to Congress, they equate to, 15,000 in interest, actually? If one of you sends, they do a multiplier. If someone sends an email, it's a little like 2,000. If you go to their office, it's like, wow, watch out. These people are really not liking this. They have a weighted factor that when you respond, I can tell you that when it starts to come out of their budget and take up their time, this is probably the highest level of integration they do not want. That I hear a valid statement being made on this video and an improper application of all the proper knowledge that's contained in the conversation. To do what? Make a phone call to a number that's been physically, they blocked it. Is not logical to me. It's not helpful. It doesn't take us anywhere. It doesn't get you in the game. It doesn't get you helping the guy. Ryan needs help. It hurts me to say that and then sit here and not be able to do more. Then I can come and talk to you about it. Hopefully that you'll pick up something and go talk to someone if you don't know. Either work with you to develop these things or go find someone who knows better who thinks they know. At least get someone that knows how to write paper. Most of the people I see write lots of stories on paper and they don't get to the bullet point references of the elements of the crime they're alleging and move on. Reference it in the framework, like for, say, if it's an extraordinary remedy of injunction, you can get a declaratory judgment injunction on all this as well. Step by step, point for point. On all the violations, the malfeasance that's going on, you can get a declaration by the court. Will it go on your way? I don't know, but they're going to have to deal with you. And what I found out in my very, very first traffic court case, I called the prosecutor himself to the stand. I had that guy on my witness stand for 20 minutes. Did I actually think I would get anything from the interaction? No. But you know what? I got him on my witness stand in the case that he was filing against me to testify in my case. The slippery eel that I knew he was in my court case for 20 minutes. Do you think he was doing anything else? No. He wasn't helping anybody else. He wasn't attacking anybody else. He wasn't meddling to attack with anybody else. He wasn't conspiring against anybody else. He was in my witness stand. Do you know what 1,000 people having him on their witness stand could do through his week? And this is the kind of insight I started to see could be possible with a really aware mass of people that really knew the law, really knew the Constitution, they really knew what rights were, really wanted to be non-dependent. And I say that purposely. Thank you, Solomon. If I don't ever respond or talk to you, I thank you for showing up at Freakers Ball all the time that you've done. I now realize on here you only have a few more interactions with us through that venue, and I do appreciate all that you said. I appreciate that, to know that you are in the world. Wherever you think you're going, where you not think you're going, where you're going, I will appreciate it sometime in the future, maybe to know that you're still around and doing whatever you're doing, whatever that is. We're not knowing at this point, but non-dependent. That was a Solomon contribution. Another insight, folks, on the workings of this thing, and again, just an insight to me that builds in what we're up against, and it builds in these ideas on how we approach it. And if we keep going to these videos and we tell each other good things and we can't weed out the bad things, We're not going to do ourselves any good if we are compassionate, passionate about helping, and then do nothing actually to help. We're just wasting people's time. I'll tell you, there was enough elements in the video that was being talked about between Ryan Bundy's wife and, what was it, Gavin? I don't know, I can't remember his name. But that you could pull out many causes. You want too many. You want just the real most powerful ones. But many causes through many remedies that I heard nobody was going to do, and that was my response to Twitter. With all the thousands of people that are listening to this, there's not one out and one other one. There's nobody else that can write proper paper to at least address this problem. Big pause. Just change up. I guess you just listen. I just read through those notes. That's my world. That's how I respond to the world anymore. But let's move on. I don't see us doing the proper thing. I'm not questioning the earnest, the honesty, the truth, the desire to do right in any of all these people. I'm saying we are dropping the ball at the point of proper action. And we have the knowledge in us. In fact, like I said, Jerry Day he'll lay out a brief. You just listen to what he said. Just go from point to point. Put A, B, C, D as the facts. He lays out a brief orally. If he would just put that to paper and put it through a proper remedy, and all the thousands of people that listen to him, each one of those go and do that independently. Find your own little hassle with the system so it's not quite the same as the guy before or the woman before. You go through the Ryan Bundy interview with his wife, and you listen to the elements of what's going on. You tie them to when you feel inside that you feel a harm for Ryan if it was done to you. Go find the violation in law that it is, and then go look at what the elements are. And you can plug in what you heard on that tape right to those elements, and you have your own habeas corpus. See, you can work on a habeas for someone's behalf, especially someone that can be shown and controlled as much as Ryan is. All you have to do is get some of the paperwork of the problem. Whether that be through his wife or whether that be through this tape, you have reason to believe that he is controlled and is restrained of his liberty even to defend himself. And that restraint, that unlawful restraint, is enough for the people that are violating him to impute more unlawfulness on him to cover their crimes and felonies. That's a part of a habeas. You do it on his behalf. They'll tell you can't do it. Then you sue him. You sue him for denying your right to stop this, because if you're right, he's unlawful. They just denied his right, and then you also got those similarly situated, didn't you? Now you bring yourself into the larger context of helping society. It's not that hard here, I guess, folks. Let's move on. Marijuana to remain illegal under federal law. Okay, fine. DEA says. I wasn't even interested in all this. This is kind of like wrote water under the bridge that they're not going to do this because they're just a bunch of liars. We can go through all the lineage of stuff and helps pharma and all this, and they can't say that, they can't admit they've been wrong. See, these lawyers, these attorneys just deny. Government can't be shown to be wrong, even though it's immune from all wrong. Think about that. Unless it says it wants to be held liable, it's okay. What should kind of make you think about what I've been saying about being able to go after all these officers? Maybe they're not the government. Maybe they're just, okay, I'm going to say the word. Maybe they're just that corporate entity, and these are the officers of a corporation. And maybe if you look close enough, the evidence is there that that's all they are, and so they don't have the statuses they're claiming, as we proved in our case in 2013. The judge imputed to the governor of Oregon the status of a governor, and I came back in his default to answer his quo warranto, and said, not only did you not answer the quo warranto or establish the court that you sit in and reside in, it doesn't exist either, or your capacity as senior judge doesn't exist in law as Article 3, or the Article 3 court itself. None of that exists. You gave to this guy we're suing a governor's status, when in fact it appears you've given him too much. In all your other errors, you gave him the status of a governor, when in fact he's not. He's only a corporate officer underneath this act of the legislature of 1953, under the Model Business Corporation Act. And so we were able to nail this again on the collateral attack on the federal judge, so-called. He wasn't a judge. He was a usurper, interloper on our case, a trespasser on the case. So these people are that way. So you just got to understand that's how what's your target. That's why you used to go after this judge for Ryan. You force on them a quo war until they don't want to answer to. But marijuana to remain illegal, these people just, war on drugs is a big, profit-making plunder on people that controls you, that makes excuses. I don't really want to even go through it because these are they trigger ideas for me. So someone started this, I guess was the point on this. I'm trying to get to what the point was of the administrative procedure. They started the question. They wanted adjustment on the rule. They wouldn't go through it. Well, what comes out is really a fraudulent statement that now anybody can jump in on. And I would say you can do it as a qualification. No different, I would say you could address traffic issues. In other words, one of the reasons that they used to deny the rescheduling, or the continued scheduling at all, in my mind, was a fraudulent use of their authority or of authority that actually didn't exist that they relied upon. Their decisions are arbitrary and capricious. And your first knowledge of that fraud on the public is when they produce their decision. And in particular, and I didn't focus on it too much, they made this discussion that they could not change the scheduling because the drugs aren't known to have any beneficial use. And then they claim that they're also not actually in commerce anyway. And so I thought if someone would just to get together now and claim that statement that it's not in use and they deny its use, that they're creating the outcome they fear, which would be the lawful use. They have no basis in order to make that determination. But one other thing is they fraudulently asserted there is no known use, there's nothing they can rely on, when in fact in the government the states are legalizing it, and there is evidence that the licensees of the federal and state government, called doctors, are giving over medicinal value, notwithstanding the agency's belief that it disregarded to allow it to come to an otherwise arbitrary and capricious decision. It's something that came to my mind that somebody, one of you that's a 420 guy or woman, I think we're way past that twice, if you're really into how you want to maintain your non-dependence from the system, and they're trespassing on your territory, on your life, making you their product, making you their resource, that you'd want to push back, otherwise they win, that you might want to have in your mind something what I just said in response to reverse action to this decision. You didn't have standing by your own question, but you asked them by letter. And let's go off into another little tangent, and thank you to the Dork Table on Saturday. I've got a little bit of the end, and I heard Vince going through a whole list of stuff. That was another bunch of elements and a cause of fraud upon us. That I just listened to all this stuff, and if people would just to reframe how they discuss it for a particular remedy, they'd have it. But he made a mention that the law refers specifically to cannabis sativa. And the argument he was reading from says, well, if it's indica that we're dealing with, specifically we're not talking about sativa. And there is a principle in law that says an excluded thing is excluded, and only those things that are included are involved, that you could take that very little point to whoever made that decision, who has the power in the DEA to make the decision, and ask the question, did your paper, talking in generalities about marijuana, and marijuana, one with an H and one with a J, which I would take issue with as well, where the law says it's specific to sativa, did your decision intend to envelop, unlawfully extend to indica? Would be one letter I would probably write if I was interested, to get the official response to start me on the trail of looking and ferreting out the law and exposing how, if that's the case, and there is a specificity, and it is named, and it is confined, and it has been many years, and the Congress has never changed it, meaning that the will of Congress is to focus on sativa, that you are presenting a position that's, at least in law, factual and right and correct interpretation, that he, an administrative side, would give you back an answer of whether or not he's encroaching or expanding his jurisdiction beyond the limitation of sativa, and why. None of you have did that, as that are so interested in this, and it is an important thing beyond the jokes about puff puff pass. To me, that's just a fun, a friend thing. This is a very serious matter of government intrusion. That I'm always looking. My mind just works this way to look for ways to undermine their authority. Any of you all interested ought to be interested the same way, and asking a one-sentence question to qualify engaging the DEA, whoever makes that decision. And I don't know. I don't have the time to go looking at who is supposed to. You got to do that a little bit. Ask that simple question. Where the law defines this as specifically and only to sativa, did your rule extend over to indica? And how would that not be arbitrary, capricious, a violation of law, violation of the intent of Congress, and on and on, you go on, and send a letter. Return receipt requested, and see what you get. Get yourself in the game. Challenge them on the law. Challenge them on the interpretation of the law, on the extent of the law. There's more to be thinking about. It's the only one that comes to mind at the broadcast to try and move through this through. But when I read this stuff, I hear a lot of people talking, and I don't see hearing a lot of really substantial action to affront it. And this is even in the industry. This is what got me too. I started I better not say what I was going to say. A lot of you may take it as an insult, but it was why I looked around those people a lot of the people I used to be around that used to smoke, and I said, it may be a good time, casual time and all, but what's going on in the world? 12 hours a day. It wasn't much. And so, this may be another problem, but this is a harm against us. This is a crime against us. This is a license of an illegality upon us. There's so many reasons we could come out that are contrary, and Vince on the dork table was illustrating many of those. That could be singular letters. The questions could be singular letters of which to these people, getting in their face. Can you imagine what 1,000 every 420? You guys sent a little letter every day at 420. You sent a little letter, one little question, and want an answer from these people. Ask for FOIAs on this stuff. What's your basis? All this. You imagine what nonsense that they would have to deal with. But even the industry is not on board with the proper action, which really floors me a lot. Fact book, cannabis industry reacts to DEA decision on marijuana. U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration on Thursday denied requests to stop classifying marijuana as a dangerous drug with no medical use, leaving users and businesses in limbo after many states have legalized it for medical or recreational purposes. That's not limbo. It's in limbo. Someone else gets to handle it. No, this is a direct problem. And it wasn't addressed properly by the DEA in answer to the request to do so. And maybe it's not valid. It may be valid on one point and completely invalid on a totally different one. But here was the point. The whole bottom line, I tell you, is the bottom line no matter what subject matter you do. But the whole point and response from the industry was, it's unfortunate that we're not going to be able to further legitimize the industry. As I'm sure this will have a negative impact on the ability of these businesses to bank on cannabis industry cash. It's about the bottom line, all these things, folks. I told you this. Why just decriminalize? Stop it being a crime. Stop the nonsense around this. The industry doesn't even care about how the decision came about wrong. No one attacks the decision, the violation of it. Why? I don't get it. So then this thing, as I tell you, I put stuff together. Remember, the whole point of the industry problem is the cash. In fact, there's a big problem. I guess the thugs know at the end of the day, like I used to be in a small grocery store when I was little, and we always had to worry about at the end of the day, robber would come in and try and take the cash that was built up all day. Grocery stores were the same way. We had to worry about someone coming in and stealing from the assistant manager usually got a gun pointing in his face periodically. It was just how the people work. The people know where the cash is going to be and they show up. Same thing with these medical marijuana dispensaries or otherwise recreational, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not looking at too much. Why would you have to legitimize the industry? It's either there or it's not, but that's a legality, isn't it? But they're only interested in the cash. And then I run across this story: Obama's operational choke point. unbridled abuse of executive power operating completely outside of the rule of law was a story about the administrative execution, the military execution against your right to bear arms, was imposing itself to berate banks from taking and doing business with gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers. Now that should be, all y'all Second Amendment people, that should be a focused attack against the government doing that, because they cannot interfere with your right to bear arms or even the ammunition or any of that by any means. Okay? But no one even presses this at all. It's a felony for them to even look at this issue. However, the more point of me looking at this was that statement before, that the industry of the cannabis industry could care less about the appropriateness of the DEA decision or how to destroy it, or how to put egg all over the DEA and show how ludicrous the conversation is about the no medical use. There's no brilliant mind out there at all to come up with one question. Are you kidding me? No, I guess there's just no mind to do this stuff to protect ourselves. We're interested in the cash, though, and it's being ripped off from us. So we have a problem with not dealing with the banks like they're not big thieves. And then I noticed here this story that the execution of Obama's administration goes against the gun dealers and gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers and sellers, and they can't go to the banks. And I've told you, how about being self-reliant? How about if in non-dependence we create our own system, our own monetary system, and our own system, separate and private from the main system. It seemed to me that if the people in the cannabis industry are flush with cash and having it ripped off is so much, and they're only worried about legitimizing themselves, but still flush with that cash. And the gun rights people, the gun manufacturers, the ammunition manufacturers, are strapped for operating cash. Why are we not in the cannabis industry stepping up and making their own credit union, that they can go to their own privatized condition and then making their money available to the gun manufacturers? Guns and drugs, what a perfect marriage. And do we hear the cannabis industry worried about that? Do we hear the gun industry looking for alternatives? No, we're so mind fixed, that we are so helpless. That, on first blush, I don't know what's wrong with my idea. I should have patented it. Literally. So maybe those of you that may actually take this to task, maybe you remember me in your construction of this new reality that we privatize. Remember to throw a little bit my way. Why the industry that's flush with cash doesn't make their own credit union system and then privatize their loans to people who could use it and create, you understand the wealth that starts to generate around that, even using the fiat paper. That no one has talked about this, and it's not been, at least on the front pages at all, that no one says anything about it. My mind boggles a bit. Well, why would they even care? Why don't they just set that up for themselves? Why are we so fixed that the government has to guide us everywhere? Oh, the independent thinkers, all the pot smokers, all the whatever reason you do it. There's no independent mind there, no independent thought, no creative thought, no creative activity to work ourselves out. No, we create these situations that we just wallow in it and agree to wallow in it. When there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there to hit the DEA agreement, the DEA decision as being what it is, and for all the reasons, like I said, Vince, I wish I had heard a little bit more. I don't know quite how much he was talking about. Some article he was reading, he laid it out for everybody. Elements of all the fraud, the crime, the abuse that's going on in this decision that could just shine the light, embarrass them big time, if nothing else. And then turn around and give impetus to the industry to say, hey, yeah, we can do this on our own. We can become our own state, the cannabis state, wherever we are, the cannabis state, because we have our own economy. We loan money. And if they're smart, they'll keep the interest very, very low. And they'll just learn to work with each other. Because as long as their cash is out in the hands of gun manufacturers, ammunition people, and whoever else they want to do, then their cash is not in their hands, is it? Maybe they could go to the miner and he can give them some of their gold for some of that cash, because he'll go spend it at the store anyway. Even the fiat stuff. So they transfer this gold, this cash to gold. And we start to, you see the so-called economy, the wealth that's generated out of Colorado. They don't know what to do with it. They don't even know what to do with it. So they know what to do with it. But I mean, the taxation they got from it alone, that's just a percentage of what they're doing that we don't hear about. That's how much cash we're talking about. And we sit here and whine and complain and joke against the abuse of the government instead of just moving completely non-dependent of it. I'm trying, Solomon. Non-dependent. I said independent a couple times last week. To me, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know that it's so original what I'm saying. I just don't think that anybody actually thinks anymore they can do anything. Yeah, and I know that's hanging out there, the Bitcoin thing sitting there, but no, I don't want to. I want to mention it, so I'm not thinking about it. But I don't. Well, you heard a Corbett report right before my broadcast on UCY. The guy who's in it, that has meetups, he's putting his life into it, going to have a business. He even states it's still an experiment. Now, I also know because a medium can become money by its trust in it, that still can develop. But you realize this digital world is not very secure. That these have cash is pretty secure. That's why people go and get it, because it's something tangible. That could be moved between people who have it and people who need it. And if the cost of just having it away from these places that are being robbed is sufficient, they don't have to have the overhead. See, they're getting paid they're getting the benefit to the cannabis people, or they don't have the cash around. It's in their credit union, which is made to do what it does. And it's a central place that's known to need to be protected. It becomes legitimized by its fact of its existence for what it does, and then other people can come into the credit union. And if the name credit union is not right, fix it, make a new name. Make this thing non-dependent. Privatize it. Guns and drugs. I smile just thinking about that connection. And what are we doing? We're supporting the non-dependence, non-control of our own ability to continue. We are not sitting hat in hand to an agency that's a thief and a plunderer, an agent of a thief and a plunderer, and those industries that it protects. Licenses. I mean, the biggest thing I can see, non-licensing is great. It just means you're an outlaw. You're an out-legal. I guess I'll say it better that way. And why isn't that a better answer than to wait on the next fraudulent lie and statement from a government agent? I mean, what did South Dakota do that these maybe I said too much. Maybe it's not trillions. Hundreds of millions of dollars can go to a space that like a bank, a credit union, they call it a state bank in North Dakota. Why can't that be done anywhere? And then you open for business, and hopefully you're not a plunderer yourself. That's hard to do. Greed's a hard thing, I suppose. I look around, I don't see many people being able to fight that one. But maybe they could have a place for their cash. And maybe they could help those that are needing because the system wants to kill another right, another capacity in the people, while the people are totally defenseless and not capable, as I think I outlined today pretty clearly, maybe in my way, that we are not capable to rise up to do for ourselves quite yet. Oh, we have the spirit. Don't worry about it. I'm not talking about it. Again, this is not a judgment about anybody. I just look out and see a lot of people talking about wanting to get stuff done, but never really pulling it together. And I'm looking and I'm saying, well, you have it in your hands. The wife of Ryan Bundy has the facts in her hands. She needs help. Let me go back to that. I think since I'm running kind of out of time. Not much, but we got a few. But what was that video's name? I don't remember now. Well, maybe that shouldn't have happened there. I don't remember now. Ryan Bundy afraid for his life. That alone. There's enough there. Why isn't that enough that we just make a phone call to a sheriff? Oh, defending Utah was the people who put on defending Utah. Okay, great sentiment. But are you defending Utah or anywhere else? I'm not so sure. I guess this is my criticism. I'm not so sure. We talk a lot, but we don't really pull out the things that we need to do. So I guess I'm trying to, I'm in a critique mode, I guess, right here about us, how we do this. I see ways to do it. I can line up the elements. I hear people saying it all the time. I'm blown away that we don't have more, I don't mean this in a derogatory, I mean lawyers. We have more lawyers amongst us than we actually know. But we have so much fear or so much trepidation or so much apprehension in us that we never fulfill ourselves. And I guess that's my frustration. I mean, I see a lot of brilliance even in people that are always saying, I don't know, I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, well, you just spoke some brilliance you don't even give yourself credit for. It's time for ourselves to give ourselves credit, and we can do it in ways that's not jeopardizing ourselves. As I was trying to explain to you, if you understand a little bit more, if you happen to find yourself in the status of someone that can be identified in the state, then you try to do a challenge to something you've already agreed to. I mean, does that sound sane to anybody? That you've agreed to do something, and then the next interaction, you're saying you're denying that and challenging it. That's not congruent. That looks like a form of insanity. It's a form of incapacity. And so they, as I've told you a week or so ago, they act in your behalf when you start doing that. And now they can feel good about the wrong they're doing to everybody. And so that's the thing I'm really concerned that we do to ourselves. I've seen this over and over and over. So hopefully that's some insight. I don't know. I don't know what goes through this broadcast and what ends up being listened to. It's very difficult to read people, and I don't get a lot of response, so it's a little difficult. But some response. Again, I do thank you for all that. But there's so much on the hook. There's so much lies going on. We without getting into too far. I mean, I wanted to get some leak memo reveals Blair's deal in blood with Bush over Iraq. The story I was reading, I'll send in the broadcaster. We see what was talked about a long time ago, that Blair was a lap poodle to Bush. Now it's out. He was. It's this whole lie that we've been wrapped up. This war of terror against us is provable. Again, more elements that could be laid out. If anybody would just sit down on the focus of that and go after it, and then attach that to a remedy they need. We're surrounded by the proof of our ability to be victorious against this oppression. I'm hoping in this discussion that I have here behind the woodshed to give you those principles that are going to bring that to fruition. We actually start wielding those powers that we are to keep. So it means we are to wield them, and if we don't wield them, we will succumb to the very same thing that we don't wield. Thank you for tuning in today. Hopefully something happened today that you can hold on to, make notes, and get out there and actually become effectual against the wrongs you see need to be made right. Thank you to Grimner and all the work you do with Freedom's Network, and then RLM, RealLibertyMedia.com, and Bo Diddy, and UCY.TV at Jules simulcasting, and people maybe put out the time we can put this broadcast simulcast at other networks. There might be other networks you see us scheduling that they're doing a replay. Maybe inquire with them to interject the broadcast at that spot that they're doing replays anyway. They have live broadcast from behind the woodshed. All your terrestrial broadcasters do appreciate it. And tech biffs and nature willing, I'll be back next week. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.